probably going to title this section something like Yankee Go Home, which is an FDJ slogan from like East Germany, which which is this anti-imperialistic slogan, as the leftists of the world like to call it, and was then shared around the world wherever the Americans went. Just Yankee Go Home, GI Go Home, all that stuff. Good stuff, which is just funny. But I am making it in response to, of course, the Yankee export of wokeism. And, of course, Americans, right-wing Americans, all the rest of you are a godsend and fighting a good fight. But there are the left-wing Americans, and they are the literal worst. And, well, they have exported this stuff to the West and beyond.
Yeah.
And if we go,
was it originally seeded in Western universities by the KGB and by people who wanted to disrupt and bring down Western capitalism?
This is Yuri Bezmenov's telling of leftist infiltration in American universities, which is got a lot of ring to it. But at the same time, we can just name the names and the articles they've written. Kimberly Crenshaw, for example, and her writing on intersectionality. I'm like, well, there you are. You don't even need to do anything special for this.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, you have these Yankee leftists who apply this weird leftist logic to American society and then just like copy and paste it onto everyone else.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Anyway, but here's the Bloomberg opinion article here that I'm referring to. Verified checkmark. The woke movement could be the next great US cultural export, and it is going to do many other countries some real good. Go to hell. I can't. I don't know what else to say to such a person who's just like.
Why don't you explain why it's bad? I think wokeism's great.
It's wonderful, is it? It's just about human rights. Anyway,
well, it's a new class system for all these basically privileged, educated, mainly white people. They're not all white, but if you've got the resources and the time and the sort of educational attainment to study and read The Guardian every week and keep up with all the new woke terms, then you can elevate yourself above other people who don't understand these terms. So it's a new class system. It's like, in the Victorian era, you had, all the etiquette and everything. It's just a new etiquette system. But it's also like a new religion. You've got all the hierarchy and the rigidly enforced scriptures and rules. But unlike traditional religions, they change on a weekly basis.
Yes, that is something you've got to deal with. If we go to the next
also,
one
there's no forgiveness as well. There's only guilt and shame.
There's only class traitors. So if we go to the next one, we have the article itself, which is titled "Why Wokeism Will Rule the World." Oh, fantastic! And I thought we'd first set up a definition of wokeism, because I do get somewhat annoyed, especially with some right-wing commentators, the real boomer types on like Fox News and whatnot, who just use it for like they want to plant trees. That's wokeism. It's just like, just shut up. Anyway, so if we go to the next one, we have Ash Sarkar's definition of wokeism, as featured in one of Carl's videos called "What is Woke Culture," which Ash Sarkar says she has no idea what woke culture is, but then defines it correctly as she puts it, on a political level, the redistribution of wealth, power, and land along class, gender, and racial lines. So class socialism, gender socialism, and racial socialism. That is the goal. And, well, these ideologies aren't new, but putting them all together is a new thing, which is essentially what wokeism is. And let's go forward.
That's the definition you'd like to use? Because I get asked like a lot, what do you even mean by woke? What is woke?
Well, I'll use Ash Sarkar's definition, because the literal communist is correct on this, I think.
I define it. I mean, obviously, this is filtered through my own perspective, my own lived experience, which is a woke term. So woke is people exploiting identity politics, victimhood, and guilt as a lever to force other people to give them social, political, cultural, and financial capital. It's ideological and has all the hallmarks of a pre-Reformation religion, has absolute faith in tenets, although, unlike religion, these change on a weekly basis. It dehumanizes non-believers, ostracizes apostates, and has group punishment and no forgiveness.
Absolutely, but this is also the case of, say, class socialism, the identity there being class, as they have argued for the kulaks, for example, are not part of the class, therefore they can get in the gulags.
Right.
And, well, it's an extension from that into the space of gender and race as well, which is why you end up with the same hallmarks as the Soviet Union, of course. But anyway, moving forward, so I just wanted to mention as well, we have individual wokists we can point to, such as Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a Yankee. And I just want to mention, I don't actually see her as she would put it, politically black either. I don't see her as a black woman. I see her as a Yankee and nothing else. Because what's really funny, and I'll have to show you the tape because I didn't include it, she did a debate with, I think, like Diane Abbott and Kemi Badenoch were on stage debating. And the really funny part is you can see just how out of her depth Kimberly Crenshaw is around anyone who isn't American.
Well, yeah, both of them against Kemi, because Kemi's like just amazing.
Yeah,
like, fantastic.
Kemi spends the debate just BTFOing both of them. So it's fantastic. But it's also just, you can see like all of her talking points are so out of her depth as soon as she's not in America.
Right.
She has no sort of crossover with the black race of the world. No, it is
Right.
entirely an American perspective.
I mean, America does have a
phenomenon.
very unique racial, sort of race history and
Yeah,
racial issues
you could
because
say-
obviously the black people were taken there.
You could say black American or something, but to say black, I don't like this because it implies that there's some unique truth that can be applied to like Barbados.
Yeah,
There
Well,
isn't.
yeah. I mean, Barbados is vaguely similar because black people were taken there sort of against their will, whereas in the UK, black people were invited here as guests and willing participants.
Sure, but I'm
So-
mentioning Barbados because we'll get to that. In a
Oh,
minute
right,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
But anyway, back to the article because there is a lot to get through. And so we'll start this off with a quote from them in which he says, this is an economics professor who's written this. I am decidedly unwoke as a professor of economics. I strongly favor a market-orientated approach. I have worked hard to defend the positions of non-woke, right-wing, and libertarian colleges colleagues in academia. What's more, I'm on record as saying that wokeism is stupid and inflexible and will state here and now that it is also boring and predictable. Sure, and you would have left it there,
Yeah.
maybe, but now we have to go for, well, and for all those reasons, we should do it, which is a weird thing to do. So, headline here, wokeism is global, as if that's an argument. Too many critics of wokeism make the mistake of focusing on its purely local status relations. They are obsessed with the influence of woke forces on their intellectual communities, the universities, their media universe, and so on. Oddly, but perhaps appropriately, this is exactly the mistake the woke make themselves. But the woke are engaging in a much larger international arena. One question raised by the woke movement, though hardly ever asked, is whether the US will be able to deploy this new intellectual tool for exporting American cultural influence. Put another way, if there is going to be an international progressive class, why not Americanize it? Because it's even less useful than class socialism. That has been tried in many a country and just brought horror. So adapting that to include, well, new identities, do it on those lines as if that's going to work. And again, what limit of identities? Why not do it on height? Why not do it on hair color?
Yeah,
You know.
and also, I mean, doing it on height is actually a good idea because I mean, people talk about structural discrimination. I'm 6'6".
Where's my
There's
reparations?
actual structures discriminate against me. Like doorways are often too short, and I bang my head. If I get in a plane or a train or whatever, there's not enough legroom. Like this is the actual structural discrimination. If you've got a different skin color, but you're 5'7", you can fit in a Ryanair seat.
Yes, but
I'm 6'6". I can't. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the perceptions or prejudices of people are. The actual physical seat space isn't enough for me. That's structural discrimination.
But you disgusting tools also make up an overrepresentation of presidents and prime ministers, so therefore reparations.
Because we have to fight for representation. We have to fight
You're
for power.
overrepresented.
Because the short man keeps shitting on us.
Anyway.
Not literally, because they couldn't get their ass high enough to do it.
Okay. But anyway, the point being made here that, we'll just have a progressive class that rules the world. Why not America? You're an idiot. Like,
and
both of these things are terrible.
Isn't it a shame that this is happening just at the time when America is pulling back from the sort of global superpower role, which really kept and preserved democracy and freedom in a lot of the world, and we're seeing democracy and freedom dissipate. Throughout Southeast Asia and throughout the I mean I would say the Middle East, but it never really had any. But Russia, China, all these places are getting much less democratic.
Sure. Well, let's continue with this. So he says, wokeism is an idea that can be adapted to virtually every country. No. Identify a major form of oppression in a given region or nation, argue that people should be more sensitive to it, add some rhetorical flourishes, purge some wrongdoers and a few innocents, and voila, you have created another woke movement. You've fallen at the first hurdle with that paragraph.
I've never seen anybody. I've never seen that. Like, when does wokeism ever do that? It's always the most privileged, like absolute perfume ponce people, like Oxbridge educated.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
But they will say that I'm fighting on this level of oppression, right? So like BLM will argue, we're fighting for the black race, and it's like, no, you're not. But the thing that he
fighting
says,
for your own property portfolio, Patrice Couleurs.
quote from him, identify a major form of oppression. What's oppression? You have to define that. And to the wokest, people being unequal, or even collectives being unequal, as in not the exact same, is a form of oppression.
Yeah.
So you're already dealing with an insane standard that is not oppression.
Yeah.
So just go to hell. I don't agree with any of these presuppositions. Anyway, or you could just not and just make one up. For example, such as Barbados, which is why I mentioned Barbados earlier. So this is a video me and Carl did, and we did a little segment together as well about this. And you might remember the clips of the 95% black population of Barbados, with 100% of the parliament being black, the prime ministers all being black. the entire seats being owned by the Labour Party, and yet there were black Barbadians marching down the streets saying, end white supremacy. Name the oppression. There isn't one. You don't even need one. You can just make one up.
Maybe those people had internalized whiteness.
They're all secretly white. That 100% Labour Party parliament. Yeah. Don't buy it. Anyway, let's go back to the article. So he continues. As the technology writer and lawyer Paul Skellis has written, #MeToo and Black Lives Matter are essentially US culture issues which provide an effective identity for the internationals of progressive class. Almost every other country now has its own version of woke, though it might greatly differ from the American version. Number one, no, it doesn't differ from the American version. They even have American accents. I mean, if we can go to the next one, just a story that we covered ages ago. And if you can scroll down just to get the images, because people will remember the images better, which is a bunch of middle-class ponces walking into a Churchill cafe and then screeching about how they have nothing to lose but their chains in this cafe because how dare they invoke Churchill? Did you know Churchill racist? And I was like, okay. They literally chant in here, it is our duty to win. American, duty. They're literally saying it with an American accent. These English students here. They are a mirror image of the American movements.
I like how one of them's got a berry.
Yeah.
Like they're in The Simpsons. As a pastiche of a sort of beatnik.
The like atmosphere in the cafe is so cringe as well, because everyone's just trying to drink their tea and they're just like, could you sod off?
Yeah.
Like, trying to have a conversation. Anyway, so we go back to the article. The French clearly see wokeism as a carrier of American cultural influence. Absolutely, yes. Quote, French politicians, high-profile intellectuals, and journalists are warning that progressive American ideas, specifically on race and gender and post-colonialism, are undermining their society, the New York Times reported in February. It quoted France's education minister on the need to fight against an intellectual matrix of American universities. Chad France. I mean, just absolute Chad France. Like, even the government, Macron's government, are like, no, this is cancer, go away, go home, Yankee, get out. Which I'm very much in, solidarity with him on that issue. Anyway, but even the unwoke among us might think Francophone society and culture could do with being a little more woke, he says. How, you might wonder? What kind of benefits could wokeness bring to France? The boss needs to know he doesn't have a right to sleep with his secretary.
I mean, that makes sense, but is that really woke?
That's harassment and rape.
Well, it's not necessarily rape, but it's harassment.
Well, if he's insisting he has a right to have sex with his secretary, that is the Islamic version.
Oh, yeah, that is, yeah.
How you interpret your wife, for example.
Yeah.
And yes, well, that would be rape. We also have a law against that, and harassment in the workplace.
And that law came in before wokeism.
Yeah, don't need that.
Right.
Needed liberal ideas for that one. Didn't need much else. Could even have conservative ideas for that one, for Frank.
But I guess from a cultural point of view, it needs to change.
The French, I don't know if they don't have laws against these things, but yeah, I mean, they're there, and you can go to the police and get these things sorted out, at least in the UK. So I don't speak on France because I don't know France. But he moves on and says, and Belgians need to come to terms more honestly with their colonial heritage in Africa. Wokeism has turned out to be a way to get them to do that. I don't agree with any of this, and you can see the game that's being played there. You need to come to terms with your colonial history. What does that mean? What does that actually mean? Well, it doesn't really mean anything. He's just saying essentially, and you'll see this in the decolonize X movement, decolonize the schools or whatever else, decolonize maths. They essentially say a morally relativistic position of Nazism is a thing, and you countries, you did colonialism, basically as bad as Nazism, and therefore Belgium needs to undergo decolonization, which is always just whatever is Belgian needs to be decolonized. Whatever is British needs to be decolonized. Delete the thing that makes the country culturally the thing it is.
Right.
That's not decolonization.
But isn't it just making sure that Belgium doesn't recolonize Africa? Because it's been on my mind, it's been playing on my mind that Belgium is dangerously close to recolonizing Africa.
I don't know if the lineage of the king is still around.
They're going to invade Nigeria.
Maybe King Leopold's great descendants are hiring some mercenary groups and going back in as we speak.
Has Belgium still got an army?
Did they ever have one?
Are they amassing? I think they're amassing in the Mediterranean right now.
Yeah.
This is a very real threat, and I hope woke has stopped Belgium from recolonizing Africa.
If we go to the next one, I'm going to make that point about decolonizing X groups. So this is just close to me, being at the University of Kent. This was the Afro-Diasporic, legal studies or whatever the hell it was. I can't remember the full name. And they say in here, in their complaints about why they need to decolonize Kent University, many disciplines are void of black, queer, feminist, socio-political theory and thought. Yes, my physics degree was devoid of black feminist queer theory. And thank God, it's also devoid of nationalist socialist theory. For the same reason. It's completely irrelevant. But, okay, it's irrelevant to reality. They also call in here for segregated safe spaces for students of color, of course, to be segregated off and don't have to be a damn whitey near them, which is not British. That's not a British thing to do.
The segregated spaces based on race.
Yeah.
That's I mean, it seems like, it's one of these things that
it's an American thing to do.
People might think it's a progressive, positive thing to do, but you got to think about how that could be abused. So, say for example, we get a racist government coming in.
We always do, according to the left.
And I mean, everything's constantly racist. But I mean, an actually, racist government, such as, I don't know, like Nick Griffin, for example. Everybody turns around and votes for Nick Griffin. Then he's going to be like, we're setting up these safe spaces. We're seeing it in China, Belarus, these places that have got horrible autocratic governments. They mimic the language, the sort of this language that's used in the West, and they copy it. So people are arrested, like political dissidents are arrested for breaching coronavirus rules.
I'm imagining in my head like the leader of the CCP being like, "Yes, my Xinjiang safe spaces for Muslims."
They literally do. They've even said some of the Chinese propaganda, the state propaganda around the containment camps, the concentration camps for Uyghur Muslims. They say it's about so it's encouraging feminism and it's a safe space. They literally say all this stuff. They mimic the language that's used in the West. So all this stuff that provides a way of segregating and dividing or controlling or containing people, it can totally be abused by, and it will. I mean, it's being abused by the people who are inventing it.
But it also
so it's definitely going to be abused by other people.
But it also, by definition, isn't a British thing to do. I mean, you could argue it's a Yankee thing to do, and the critical race theorists all believe in segregation if you go and read any of their texts. So, I mean, there's the direct lineage there. So decolonizing the UK means colonizing it with foreign ideas here. And, well, I can prove it to you, because even the Yankees in 1943 knew this when they came over to help us defeat the Nazis. So if we go to the next one, this is just a propaganda film produced by the US during the war, How to Behave in Britain. I featured it before, but I thought I'd feature it again, also because I don't know if you've seen it, but it's amazing. There's a clip in here which a white and a black talk to each other. And how do we deal with that? So let's play the first clip.
Goodbye. It's been very nice meeting you both.
Glad to have met you, I'm sure.
Funny you should come from Birmingham, too, isn't it? Have you come to my Birmingham, you come to my home and have a cup of tea with me. Both of you.
Thank you, we will.
Goodbye and good luck.
Goodbye. Bye-bye. Now, look, men, you heard that conversation. That's not unusual here. It's the sort of thing that happens quite a lot. Now, let's be frank about it. There are colored soldiers as well as white here, and there are less social restrictions in this country. Just what you heard, an English woman asking a colored boy to tea. She was polite about it, and he was polite about it. Now, look, that might not happen at home, but the point is, we're not at home.
I mean, I just love it. This is like
weirdly like,
well, listen, man, that happens here. They have that sort of thing here.
And it does show, like, a lot of the stuff that, that's obviously racism is like
1943,
an enforced social rule. It's it's an etiquette code, which a lot of the woke stuff is as well. Yeah. The more things change, the more things stay the same.
But that's 1943 UK. And there is even a battle that breaks out at one point in the UK over segregation, which the US tried to do that. But we won't have time for this because I'm quickly running out of time anyway. But anyway, back to the article. He says, I also think French culture and society will emerge just fine from this engagement with wokeism. Most of all, wokeism is a way of spreading ideas from a relatively feminized American culture to a world less supportive of human rights. It's just for human rights, bro. We're just helping out human rights. And he says women's rights. It's like, no, just women's rights. That's what wokeism is about. We don't get women's rights any other way. They never got that in the West any other way. And this totally will help with that, won't it? He says, returning to the glories of American cultural imperialism, consider the British philosophical pessimist John Gray. He recently wrote the following weird but insightful statement. Wokery is successor ideology to neoconservatism, a singular American worldview. This is where you don't... No. Wokeism is not the successor to neoconservatism. It is the successor to socialist thought applied along more identities. Nothing else. That is why it goes along with the exact same tactics, the exact same sort of language, and the exact same outcomes. Moving on. He says, that may be why it has become a powerful force only in countries such as Britain, heavily exposed to American culture wars. In much of the world, Asian and Islamic societies, and a large part Europe, for example, the woke movement is marginal and its American prototype viewed with bemusement, indifference, or contempt. Which, good. And that's how it should stay. Does that make you feel better or worse about wokeism, he says? I say better. Again, keep the bigger picture in mind. It doesn't matter who controls the English department at Oberlin College, but it would be nice if the Saudis allowed more rights for women. Right. It doesn't matter whatever happens where you live. The only things that matter are whether or not foreigners have more rights. Therefore, I'm happy to destroy our own societies and our own culture so that Saudi women can drive. I was like, that's your argument, really? That there'll be more rights in the world because, I don't know, the third world is going to be receptive to wokeism. You know what the Saudi response is to this stuff? That's un-Islamic. And that's the end of the conversation.
Right, yeah.
They're not Enlightenment thinkers. They're not, susceptible to any of these
And
ideas.
ironically, it's traditional capitalist values that are dragging Saudi Arabia out of the dark ages. So the desire to make money means they're now distributing alcohol licenses. I don't think they're openly selling alcohol yet, but it's coming. They're developing the tourist industry because they want to make money. They need to diversify their economy away from just selling oil to us.
It's not because people turning up and saying, "Don't you know you're homophobic?"
Oh yeah, all this woke stuff, man. All this woke stuff totally
Saudi response is Chad, yes.
is completely self-defeating because if you look at it, I mean, we'll get into my bit, but all the people that are outraged at my pilot, I went and looked at them all. They're all just like fat, pink-haired, like, I'm gender neutral. It's like, no, you're just a fat slug of a human. They're all like ugly. They're all nobody like, and none of them, you can tell immediately, none of them make any money. None of them get any like laid. None of them are doing anything with their lives apart from sitting in their mum's basement, like tweeting away. They've become this new like
They
slug.
put new pronouns in their bios.
Yeah, pronouns in their bios. They just spend
today.
all day on Twitter just slating stuff. They don't create anything. They just destroy.
All right, I'm going to have to blast through because I know I am already over time. But if we go to the next one, I just want to make the point as well because he tries to argue that, this will work in the Arab world. Will it? Do you not remember, like, we were in Afghanistan for 20-odd years or whatever it was, and the polling done by Pew, whilst under U.S. occupation, 94% of Afghans under U.S. occupation said a wife must always obey her husband. 60% of Afghan women said that women should have no right to decide if they wear the veil. 60% of their own women.
Based women.
I should have no rights whatsoever. If we go to the next one, so we just have a visual representation of how well wokeism was received in Afghanistan, which is, it had absolutely no impact because it is hollow and meaningless on a reference to actually changing reality. Yeah. Anyway, if we go back to the article, he then goes on to argue that, America could be good. And it's like, yeah, the founding fathers version of America, not the woke version of America, you moron. And if we move on, so he says... in conclusion, because I don't have time for the rest of it, he says, what is America really about? And this is the question, which is, what are American values / ideology as perceived by foreigners? Of course, there are fights within the United States, but what do we think of when we think of Yankee ideology or whatever it is? And there's the Founding Fathers version, or the liberty-based version. So if we go to the next link here, John, you can see an example of that. As you always say, Americans will always fight for liberty. 1943, going back to 1778 there, the liberty version of the United States, the one we all love and cherish. And there's that version, or it could be the next one, if we go to the next one. So, yeah, this is a U.S. embassy, which put up Black Lives Matter flags and the rainbow flags there in Seoul. And even the Koreans were like, come on. This is, this is god awful, really, you leave. So, no foreigner wants the Yankee leftist nonsense. We don't want that. Go home, Yankee. And if we
why did they put them up? I'd love to see them put them up in Saudi Arabia. Put them up in the embassy in Saudi Arabia if you got any balls.
See how that goes.
Yeah.
If we go to the next one, we can see the Visegrad Group's response to this. People may know the Visegrad Group being the selection of countries in Eastern Europe. It's a no from us. Go to hell. Not interested. And if we go to the last one, should have the last image here, which is just Yankee Go Home. That is the correct response to the Kimberly Crenshaws of the world, at least from us who are not Americans. As for the right-wing Americans doing their work, God bless you. If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to check out all the premium content we have on the site, such as this, which is from the live event we did, in which I gave the feminist immigration policy that will save the West. Let me know in the comments how sexist it is. Anyway, if you'd like to find out what else is coming out on the website, you can always go over to lotuseaters_com to follow us there. Thank you and goodbye.